Good evening and welcome to Connecticut Politics Live. I am Joe Aguirre. My guest was a Green Party candidate for the 3rd Congressional District. And as I got to know Justin Paglino, he's turned me on to some really cool ideas. One of them being one of my favorite, and I've talked to so many more people, Dr. Paglino, who love the idea of single payer health care.
Hmm.
So, you and I recently had a conversation where we kind of explained what exactly single payer is and why it's to people's benefits. And the funny thing is, towards the end of our conversation, you pointed out, right, this idea is generally associated with the Democratic Party. And outside of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, uh, nobody's pushing single payer or universal health care. And I said to you, and I think there's something to this, that I think the fact that really neither party's interested in us having this tells you everything you need to know about this. It's probably really good for us.
Yeah, well, I think it would be really good for us. And I think, it is good to do kind of a cost benefit analysis, say, well, look at this policy. Who would it be good for? Who would it be bad for? And, I really think the major losers, in a sense, would be the people who have stock in the major insurance companies. The people who really profit off of our for-profit health insurance system. Now, most of the people who work in insurance as employees, I think there will still be work for them because it is still an insurance business that needs to do the work of, getting uh, requests from doctors and paying out the money. I mean, there's still going to be a lot of work to do, but instead of being employed by a private insurance company, they could be employed by the federal government, like so many people are right now. The people who do work for Medicare in the Department of Health and Human Services, the people who do work for Medicaid in various states. In fact, sometimes the government will even contract that work out already to private insurance companies because it's still work that needs to be done. But the issue with private insurance is all of the money, all of the overhead that's being pocketed, right? It's all the money that's going as profits, that it's being run as a business. And I don't think healthcare insurance should be run as a business. And it doesn't have to be. It could be treated as a public good. It could be treated as something uh, that we all need, that we're entitled to. Um, and if the federal government makes it so, then we could all have it. It's and uh, it's really continues to be outrageous to me that we have such injustice in our healthcare system, that we have so many people going without the healthcare that they need, so many people uninsured or underinsured, people like the people you mentioned the last time we talked, who, they have a symptom, they put things off, they're worried about going to see the doctor because they're worried about the cost. And they're being responsible to their family. They don't want to maybe burden their family with the cost of a major surgery, um, or they just can't afford this. And then if they do, when people do get sick and they do go in and get the treatment they need, often too late, uh, if they can't afford it, their insurance often doesn't cover them as well as they think it's going to. A lot of times you think you have good insurance until you actually get sick and have to use it, and you find out about the copays, and you find out about the limits on what your insurance is willing to pay. I mean, the deductibles can be enormous. um, and if you and you get straddled with medical debt. I mean, there are so many people, under the burden of medical debt right now, and it causes the majority of bankruptcies are caused by medical debt. And you have these businesses going after people who are sick. I mean, I heard a story of one guy who was he was a young man, and he had a suicide attempt, and he was in his teens. He was hospitalized, and and when he came out, he had all this debt for his hospitalization that he's still paying off years later, and it's still hindering him in his 20s, trying to get his head above water. I mean, this is someone who's trying to get literally a second chance at life, right? And he's trying now. He's trying to make it. And our system, our medical system, is not making his life any easier. And that's stories like this happen all the time. And we can't afford to do better. We can afford to guarantee health care for every American, and we should.
What a great concept, right? Healthcare as a right, the idea that our health is not for profit. I think those are good things. Do me a favor, Dr. Justin, and can you explain? Because I feel like right wing media has made this idea of universal or single payer healthcare out to be like, the brink of socialism and it's all downhill after that. Can you explain exactly what that would look like for people who maybe don't really understand what this single payer healthcare system would look like?
Well, so single payer means that if when you have medical expenses, they are paid for by a single payer, which would be, in this case, the federal government. Okay, so that everybody's medical expenses would be paid for. And unlike now, when you have networks of doctors, like you have your insurance company tells you who you can go to, who's in your network, who's outside your network. They'll charge you more if you want to go outside of network. You worry um, if you go on vacation and you get sick. Can I see this doctor because maybe they'll be outside of my network and it's going to be too expensive? All that would be a thing of the past, because it would just be the law that doctors need to accept um, these payments, that this is the way doctors get reimbursed. So suddenly all doctors become in network for people. So that's also one major advantage. And the doctors who um, work uh, battling insurance companies to get the treatments that their patients need. I mean, doctors spend hours on the phone with insurance companies. The physician themselves, this is work they can't always get someone else to do. It has to be the doctor in many cases, explaining why why their patient needs these treatments. Um, that is a much easier process. They will tell you with the federal government, if they're working with, believe it or not, working with Medicare, it's much easier to get things approved than it is with many times with private insurance companies. So I really believe that doctors in general love Medicare. They feel like they're able to give their patients the treatments they need, and we're the patients, right? And that's what we want. Is we want the doctor to have the freedom to really be in control. Now, the concern people bring up about well, there's going to be restrictions and some things maybe won't be covered. Look, I mean, it's true in the modern era that there are some treatments that are really expensive. Um, but already as it is, many times formulary, insurance companies are unwilling to cover extremely expensive treatments. Um, and but with the money saved, the money we save by switching to single payer, I really think it would expand our options. I think if anything, it would free up more money to go towards treatment. Every dollar that isn't going towards stock dividends for people who own insurance, own dividends of who own stock in Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's money that could be going towards patient care.
Right.
So I think the fear that this is going to restrict care is really the opposite of what I would expect. I would expect it to free up more money to provide more care, not just to more people, but more treatments.
The other boogeyman uh, talking point I hear of why universal health care is terrible is people are not going to want to be doctors anymore. Do you think that there could be less of a demand for people looking to become doctors if there's just a set amount that the government would be willing to pay these folks for procedures, operations, or whatever have you?
There's a lot of dissatisfaction right now among a lot of physicians with their jobs, and I think a lot of that is stemming right now from the increasing privatization of medicine. A lot of doctors that used to just hang out a shingle and set up a private practice um, are increasingly finding themselves in groups, in HMOs, um, getting bought out by large conglomerates. You know, it seems that Yale keeps on expanding and expanding. They take over this hospital, that hospital. They take over physician groups. Um, and like my own internal group is now part of Yale Medicine that they didn't used to be out here in Guilford. And I know that I really think that the forces that the pressure that they come under from these, I don't know, call them suits, these people who just want money, who just want this to be a profitable business, I think is very frustrating to doctors. I went to medical school. Doctors, people go into medicine because they want to help people. They want to use their skills to treat people. And things that get in the way of that can be very discouraging when you can't get the treatment for your patient that you want to get them because or if you have to be on the phone for hours with insurance company fighting for the treatment your patient needs when you feel like what the patient needs, you should be able to just prescribe it. It's very frustrating. um, Being having too many patients, having you know the some having not enough physicians being hired because they're trying to save costs and save salaries, and then distributing the burden of the work among too few physicians. These are the kinds of things that can make a physician miserable. What a physician wants is just the freedom to practice practice medicine. I mean, they want to have a work life balance, but um, they want to have uh, they just want to practice their science and their art. And the profit motive is really it's not it's not physicians um, getting too little money that's generally making them unhappy. Physicians generally are well paid and make a good living. I really think it's the privatization of our system that is making a lot of physicians miserable.
Interesting. So let me ask you this too now, because I hear all these different terms: universal health care, single payer health care, Medicare for all. Is that all essentially the same thing or the same idea, or are there differences in those?
Yeah, the terms can be confusing. Medicare for all is a slogan. It's what some people it's kind of a term that people have used, and it refers to single payer health care. It doesn't mean just taking the Medicare system as it is and lowering the age to zero. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, because um, it would mean also uh, eliminating a lot of the copays and deductibles that people pay now. Um, but it is most similar to that idea of taking Medicare and dropping the age to zero. With uh, but Medicare for all, when people use that term, they're talking about single payer um, Medicare for all with improvements. Some people call it, like Physicians for a National Health Program use the term improved Medicare for all, meaning it's not just Medicare as it is, but it would be an improved system to really make healthcare free and make healthcare comprehensive. Like right now, Medicare doesn't include a lot of things. You know, vision and hearing and dental are not included. You know, dental should be included as part of single payer universal health care. Uh, and so um, now, when people say universal health care, that can be a bit of a weasel word. Uh, it can, because you could have universal health care that's administered by private insurance, technically, right? You could say, well, we're going to expand healthcare to everyone, but basically, instead of the federal government paying the healthcare providers, the government's going to pay insurance companies to take on more people or to insure more people. It's it's a difference in kind of where which direction the money is going. Um, uh, and So I favor single payer healthcare. Uh, and when people say universal healthcare without specifying single payer, sometimes they're talking about letting private insurance come in and
Okay.
maybe subsidizing it to expand healthcare to more people. Now, more people getting healthcare is a good thing, but it's still going to have the expense of private insurance, and I'm much more skeptical. I don't really trust that system or that idea.
Okay. You just said something I think very interesting, and I'd like you to expand on that. But, right, the more people that have insurance, the less it costs. And I know for some people, they don't really understand that concept. Kind of explain that a little bit. Why do we want everybody to be covered?
Yeah, I mean, that's a so you know, typically in like with car insurance, you know, the insurance business model, the more people that are paying in, the more money the company has to to pay out as benefits or to keep as profit. And insurance companies historically have really wanted to sign up healthy people for health insurance, right? Like just like life insurance companies want to sign healthy people up for life insurance because a healthy person is paying, and never asking for much in return. and
Yeah.
uh, that's why historically health insurance companies would want to know before they sign you up, how healthy are you? Are you are you if you're a sick person, we're not so interested in giving you health insurance or
Right.
selling you health insurance because we know that you're going to cost us money because we're going to have to be paying for your health care. Um, Single payer is kind of a different. It's an entirely different model. It's really saying, as a country, we're going to pool our resources, and that means a tax. Now, to me, the best way to do that is through a progressive income tax. So I believe in progressive income tax. It means uh, we have a unequal distribution of wealth in this country. We have really concentrated wealth. It's getting more and more concentrated in recent decades, um, and people whose wealth is ballooning off the charts, they can afford to pay more taxes. And not only that, but I also believe that if we don't have a progressive income tax, wealth just gets more and more concentrated. I just believe that old adage, the rich get richer. If you don't do anything about it, we end up with generational wealth, these wealth that just gets entrenched and settled and goes on for generation after generation. And we become no longer a country of equal opportunity because you're either born into great advantage or you're born into great disadvantage, or you're somewhere in the middle. Um, so anyway, the idea of single payer to pay for it is my idea is to say, let's use our progressive income tax to generate the money we need to pay for people's health care. And some people find that scary, but here's the good news. The good news is it would cost less than we are currently spending on healthcare. That's the good news. We are already paying a lot for an inferior product. We pay more for healthcare than any other country per person. And, that's money that's coming out of our pocket. And a lot of it is regressive. It's coming out of poor people scraping the bottom of the barrel, to pay their deductibles, or they're going into debt. Progressive income tax is a fair tax. It's a tax that only taxes you in proportion to what you can reasonably afford to pay. And it's not going to leave anyone in poverty. It's not going to leave people struggling. It's not going to leave people uh, in under mountains of debt. And like I said, it costs less. If you look at our current healthcare expenditures, last time I looked, they're about 3 trillion a year. And there was a Yale researcher who in the School of Public Health who did a study, actually a survey of studies, and looked at about 20 different studies that all said single payer would be cheaper. And some of them estimated it would be about maybe just a little bit cheaper. Some of them estimated 5%, 10%, up to 15% cheaper. So if you think of the number 3 trillion, we're spending $3 trillion a year, you and me, that includes our deductibles, that includes our premiums, that includes our copays. And you take that number and imagine saving 10% of that, that's $300 billion. So $300 billion less expense out of you and me. So this kind of fear mongering about, it's going to be too expensive, it's going to crush us, we're going to be crushed by tax. I don't think that's real.
Right.
I don't think that's real at all, because we're actually being crushed right now with medical expense. And wouldn't you rather pay less money to the government than pay more money to the private insurance? You're going to get a better product and you're going to pay less for it. It really just makes a lot of sense to me. So
I think the two bigger arguments I hear is number one, the government being in charge, it's going to be a disaster. Although I would say the Affordable Care Act says differently. And then number two, I hear this one a lot, and I've seen literally testimony in front of Congress kind of proving it's not true, but this idea that it's going to lead to rationing, that there's long wait lines for procedures, or that people from places like Canada are coming to the United States for treatments because of the long waits. Any truth to that as far as anything that you've seen?
well, I mean, the closest thing we have to single payer right now is Medicare. And Medicare, our as we get older, we get sicker, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of so when you get over 65 and you get on Medicare, you um, you enter into that system and you depend on it primarily for your health care. And I follow the news. I don't see a lot of articles about the scandal of Medicare failing to do its job. I don't see a lot of articles about people like going without needed surgeries, who are on Medicare, right? People who are elderly and sick, they are getting the care. They are getting good care. I mean, this is not universal. There are deficits in the system, uh, and but I think a lot of that is because it's too restrained, and it's not including everything that it should be. I mean, it's not including eyes, ears, but and like prescription medicines were only recently added. And there's also been a move, unfortunately, to privatize Medicare in the form of Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage is really a privatized version of Medicare. For anyone listening trying to decide whether you should go on traditional Medicare or Medicare Advantage, please go on traditional Medicare. I recommend, because Medicare Advantage is a way that the insurance companies found to get their paws on some of that money. Really, I mean, Medicare Advantage is private insurance companies coming in and saying uh, we'll administer healthcare for these people, but we'll find a way to do it that'll cut costs, but we'll keep some money as profit. And so people are profiting in Medicare Advantage, and it has the same corrosive effect as it does for people under 65 in the private insurance market, which is where really the problems are. I mean, that's where people are struggling to get their health care. I mean, if you read healthcare horror stories in the United States, it's generally not people over 65, right? It's people under 65. If you're talking about the ability to get care, the ability to get care in time, um, it's people who are uninsured. It's people, and it's even people with insurance who get ill. It's the story you told me of the guys who had palpitations or heart symptoms for a long time and were afraid to go because of the expense. Once you get over 65 in this country, you don't worry about that in the same way anymore. And if you look at our life expectancy at different ages, you can kind of calculate somebody's life expectancy at different ages, right? Like when they're 10, when they're 20, when they're 60. If you compare our graph to the graphs in other countries, we're not doing so well until you get to 65. And then it starts to catch up. And what happens then? That's when you get guaranteed health care. That's when you know that you're going to be able to afford to get the care you need. So this fear mongering that you're talking about like it's gonna be a nightmare. It's gonna, you won't be able to get what you need, right? I mean, to me, it's the opposite. It's if just contrast the people who are getting single payer, um, socialized healthcare, health insurance right now versus the people who aren't. And they're getting a better outcome. And I don't know. I mean, I could talk more about that, but that's my
Oh,
main point there, I guess.
yeah, and I agree with you very much. I think that's definitely again. I think like you and I talked about last time, just the idea that neither party's pushing it. That's weird.
Well, I mean, so I was a progressive Democrat for 30 years. I'm turning 50 this year, and about 2 years ago, I made a switch from Democrat to Green Party, and the reasons are many. But one of them is that I just have gotten so frustrated with the Democratic Party not being a populist people's party anymore. I don't see them anymore as really representing the interests of the common man and woman. I just I really see them as having sold out, and I think the evidence is clear that they cater to the interests of donors from Wall Street, from energy, big pharma, the defense industry, um, the energy industry. They're fracking. Joe Biden is talking about opening up more public land for drilling in Alaska now, and there's just it goes on and on and on, and we have a country that's where money has far too much influence in our politics. I think what we need is a democracy that better represents what people really want. Because I believe in the goodness of people. I believe generally in the judgment of people. And I think if we had a more representative democracy, a democracy that better represented people and what they want, kind of policy they want to see, and the polling supports this, that we're not getting what we want out of government. We're not getting the popular things. universal health care, as you defined it, is fantastically popular. Single payer health care has majority support, and I think, if there was more leadership on it and it had more people fighting for it, I think we'd it would show it would be widely embraced. I mean, look at the support Bernie Sanders had running on single payer. Look at the movement he built up behind him. Um, Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's,
But
to sort of speaking of what you just said, I the reason I had you on the radio last time was specifically to talk about this because I found the conservative audience, despite what Fox News would lead you to believe, they were, especially the older crowd, were very interested in health care for all. They thought it was a great idea, and we're asking, why don't we have this? Which kind of leads me to my next thing, in which you again just sort of alluded to. 41% of voters in Connecticut, 42% of voters nationwide are unaffiliated. And yet, every other November, for the most part, we're voting Democrat or Republican. And you and I talked about this a while ago. I still feel like people who might vote third party, you know, maybe they're too nervous that if they vote third party, it helps the Republicans, or if they vote third party, it helps the Democrats. And so rather than vote where they want to vote, they end up voting to help the party out that they're afraid is going to lose.
yeah, I focus on this in my mind and in my reading and all the time now. This is what I think about is 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 the two party system and how unrepresentative it is. It's not a good system. And I always bring out this quote from John Adams, who said, a division of the republic into two great parties is to be feared as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. And those are strong words, but I think he's got a point. This whole us versus them polarity team mindset is really toxic. It's really polarizing. It's really destructive. And it comes from this fear, this anxiety that you mentioned. So when we go to vote and look at the candidates, we don't just think about which candidate we like the best, right? We think about, first of all, who has a chance of winning, right? We call that strategic voting, meaning, I may like this third party candidate more, I may like their policies more, but I'm afraid to vote for them. That's, not the kind of democracy I want to see for our country. I really love democracy. I really love America. I really want to see a country where you go into the booth and vote your hopes, not your fears, where you get to really express your opinion. Because again, I believe that if we change our electoral system to make it more representative, to really represent what people want, we could have better outcomes. And when people are going into the voting booth and voting not even what they want, right? They're too afraid to go in there and vote what they want because they're afraid it's going to mess things up. So they go in there and they vote for somebody that they only kind of like, the lesser evil. That's distorting our whole government. That's putting people in power that nobody really likes. And so the better system is ranked choice voting. I mean, if this was a problem without a solution, I would just throw up my hands and say, oh, that's too bad. That's the country we live in. That's the system. That's the way it is in the Constitution. And we've always had two-party dominance. We're always going to have two-party dominance. I'm used to it. I'm just going to learn to live with it. But no, there is a solution. There's actually a very tried and true solution that's been used in, like, Australia has been using ranked choice voting. They call it preference voting for over 100 years. For over 100 years. The founders didn't have ranked choice voting, right? Like Washington, Adams, Jefferson. Like, it didn't exist back then. It was something that was developed later in the 19th century. Um, Scholars looked at playing around with different voting systems and looking at how things turn out if you use different systems, and they came up with this. Actually, there's different varieties of it. Uh, it can get a little technical, but the basic idea is you rank your choices in order of preference, and then uh, you don't have to worry about who has a chance of winning before you vote. You express your real preferences. Isn't that what we want when we vote? Is to really go in there and say the truth? Don't we want to be
Right.
able to go in there and be honest in the voting booth and really have our actual desires put down onto paper? You go in there holding your nose and voting, voting lesser evil. Who wants to do that? And again, if this was a problem without a solution, I wouldn't talk about it. But it has a solution. It has a very um, feasible, workable solution that we know works because they've been using it in Australia for over 100 years, and they don't have a two-party system. I mean, they have multiple parties. And when you live in Australia, I actually ran into a couple people from Australia when I was out canvassing and collecting signatures. And I asked them, "Do you know about ranked choice voting?" And they're like, "Yeah, we love it. That's how we vote. That's what we do." They said it with an Australian accent, but they that's what they said.
Thanks for not mocking the accent. Is that you easily could have done that here?
No, I wouldn't give it a try. I would not give it a try.
Too funny.
um,
Interestingly enough, Dr. Justin, I've talked to a lot of Democratic leaders in the past month, and I've brought up ranked choice voting to all of them. And I've sort of gotten the party line from them for the most part. And they've been very forthcoming about most of the things we've talked about. But when I bring up ranked choice, they're like, well, it's something we really got to look at. And, we'll talk about it, which, I get politics. That means no, right? They're not going to do it. And I think when you're in a situation like the Democrats here are in Connecticut or the Republicans in Kentucky, you don't want ranked choice voting. You want the system that you have because it works out for you. But, we've seen it be very effective in Alaska.
mhm.
So I do think it's something that I think once the people fall in love with the idea, the politicians will probably come around. Which brings me to my last thing I wanted to ask you about, also in the name of voting, but on November 8th, Connecticut voters gave our legislature the opportunity to add early voting. And it's something they're going to be looking at. I've asked the majority leaders if there's been preliminary discussions. And basically, what they've said is probably about 2 weeks or so. They'll have hearings and go through the whole process, but they don't anticipate it being any more than about 2 weeks. How do you feel about early voting, and what would be your time frame?
uh, Voting is something that should be easy for people to do. It should be, and uh, we used to have, I mean, we still have problems with this. We still have, you see, every year on presidential election years, especially the lines around the block, right, where people are waiting 3 hours, 4 hours to vote. That's wrong. That's really wrong, and that means that so we're making it's too hard for people to be able to exercise their constitutional right to express their vote. So we have to problem solve on that. Um, and unfortunately, you know, the the people who are in charge of running elections sometimes have partisan biases or interests in, say, restricting the number of voting machines in areas that where they don't think they're going to have a good chance of winning. Um, we, you know, I think I'd like to see our electoral system run in a less partisan way. Here in Connecticut, we're used to having Democratic registrars of voters and Republican registrars of voters. In all most states, I think it's all states but four. It's a nonpartisan position. The registrar of voters.
Should
Um,
be.
you know, Early voting, I like the idea if it's going to make it easier for someone to vote because they have to work on election day, right? Or um, you know, I like I'm for coming at the problem from multiple directions and trying to make sure we encourage people to vote, get people registered to vote, and make it easy for people to vote. Uh, and I mean, I'm in favor of no excuse absentee ballots as well. Uh, I think you can go too far with the early voting if you make the period too long. I do think the length of the time is important because there can be developments late in the campaign that might change some people's minds about how they wanted to vote if they voted too early. But um, but in general, yeah, I'm in favor of it. Also, why not make Election Day a national holiday, a federal holiday,
Yep.
um, so that people can really, hey, let's enjoy. I love Election Day. I feel very patriotic on Election Day. I was like, this is democracy in action. This is people going out. I mean, I love it, and I think we should treat it as a holiday. And um, but primarily for the sake of freeing people up to participate in democracy and making sure that they have the time to go do it.
It's funny. I mean, a lot of schools are closed on election day because they're polling places. It would just make sense to, like you said, just let's shut it all down for the day and let's have at it. I've spent most of my adult life covering elections, so I love election day, and I just want to be following it very closely and not doing anything else. So I'm all for that. And to your point about Pennsylvania with a 50-day voting period, their senatorial candidate Fetterman had a stroke. So, like you said, things could happen. And if you voted before that, I would still think most people are like, I want that guy, but there's nothing you could do at that point.
Yeah, and there's another point here about ranked choice voting, which is that if a candidate drops out who was your first choice, your vote will go to your second choice. So it's another problem that ranked choice voting can solve, uh, especially in primaries where there's like 10, 12 candidates, like the Democratic primary or what have you.
Yep.
If you voted early, people are often dropping out at the last minute right before election day when it comes to primaries. We saw that, like, with with Biden's nomination in the Democratic primary, where all of a sudden his many of his competitors dropped out and rallied behind him um, before a primary that they were probably worried that Bernie Sanders was going to win if they didn't rally around Biden. I think that was the Virginia primary, I think. So anyway, just to throw that in there, um, so I do think early voting is good, but I do think it can be too long a period. That's something that I think it should. I don't know what's appropriate exactly. Maybe a week, maybe two. 50 days, is that really that sounds too long.
That's too long. I agree. I think that is too long. I like the idea, honestly, of about 14 days. I think 2 weeks time in a state the size of Connecticut. I think that's a pretty reasonable amount.
Yeah, I mean, just so that someone who has a busy schedule, I mean, remember, people are living under the pressure of sometimes having two or three jobs and not having a lot of time and juggling children because we don't have maybe not being able to afford childcare. Or I mean, people are under a lot of pressure in our economic system, and just enough time that they can try and find a day, um, find a few hours, and make sure there's enough polling stations so it doesn't take them 3 hours to go do this. um, you should be able to get in and out within 30 minutes tops.
Before I let you go, Dr. Justin Paglino, got to ask you, you planning on running for office again? Is there anything that you're looking at, or what can we expect from you? Because I think you're a brilliant guy, and you're somebody I would love to see representing this state in some capacity.
I appreciate that, Joe. I, as a third, because I've decided to go this third party route, I've put myself up against on an uphill battle, right? I mean, I purposefully decided I didn't want to run as a Democrat because I am so committed to the ideal of having a system with more than two parties. So I feel I have to walk the walk and run as a third party candidate. But in the system where people go in and vote their fears instead of their hopes, and vote lesser evil, and everyone's so accustomed to that, it's very difficult for third party candidates to get votes. And we don't have public campaign finance for federal candidates. So it's very hard for me to raise money. It's very hard for me to have a lot of events. But what I'm focusing on right now is trying to build the Green Party in the New Haven area. We have a New Haven Green Party chapter, and it's we have I'm really working on kind of trying to revitalize it right now. I'm trying to find like-minded people, because I know I'm not I'm not alone in this assessment of where we need to go. I know there's a lot of people who are just kind of, well, look, we've got the system, we've got Democrats and Republicans, and that's the way it's always going to be, and we've got to work with that system. I'm past that point. I'm at a point where I don't want to work within that system, but I know I'm not alone in thinking that way. And there are a lot of other Green Party members in the state, but I want to try and find more. So that's my focus for this year, and for the immediate future, is trying to build the organization, trying to find more like-minded people. I appreciate you having me on programs like this, so maybe I can reach some people who might want to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm interested too in that project. I really think we need to, if we want, as people with my views, if we want to see them better represented, I think we have to vote for them, and we have to organize as a political unit that fights for these policies, and not get diluted in a party that has that really relegates the more progressive ideas to the corner, and because it sees them as being at odds with their donors' desires, and they're worried they're going to lose money as a party if they embrace single payer, if they embrace an end to fracking, if they embrace a much larger Green New Deal, if they embrace cutting the Pentagon budget, if they embrace universal higher education. There's a lot of things that I think are really popular, but the party leadership, but they're not popular with the wealthy, right? They're not popular with the people who stand to lose money off these ideas. And I mean, there are wealthy people who are progressive and green too, but I'm looking for like-minded individuals to try and build something, to try and put pressure. I think we have to put electoral pressure on the Democrats. And I don't believe you can do that by being a Democrat. I believe you have to be something else. I want to see the left unify electorally. I think the Green Party banner is a great umbrella to do it under. I think it makes sense. We're left. We have great values, and I think they're popular values. If we want to put pressure on Democrats, we have to show that we're willing to not vote for them. We have to show that they have something to lose if they don't enact these policies we want. They have our votes to lose. If we don't show that we're willing to vote differently, then they're just going to keep taking our votes for granted, keep taking the donations from Aetna and Exxon and Wall Street, and use that money to basically buy elections, to flood the airwaves with half truths, let's be honest, and convince people that they're the better option of their two options. You've only got two choices, and then to demonize their opponent and fill people with fear that that things will go completely downhill if you don't vote for me because you'll get that. It's extortion. So anyway, I may run for office again. I may run for selectman here in Guilford. One issue that's kind of local that I'm interested in is trying to deal with electricity. And, the Eversource rates just doubled.
Yep.
And, at a time when global warming is a problem, I think there's a win-win solution here, which is if we build up more and more renewable energy capacity, we can lower the price of electricity. I mean, the sun is shining on all of us every day, and that is a resource. We don't have to keep burning things to get electricity. We can we can use the wind and the sun that's all around us. It's everywhere, and if we just build up that infrastructure, we can have cheap electricity. And how great will that be for everybody and for everything, for the economy, for people's pocketbook? But first, we have to take back control of the system. We have private, again, the problem comes down to money. Again, we have private companies generating our electricity and selling us our electricity. There's 4 towns in Connecticut that have public utilities. Remember when you played Monopoly and you'd land on a utility? We used to have more. We used to have more municipal utilities, and that means that we have more control. We have more say because it's something you vote on. You have a public control over it. It's not just a private company trying to decide how to make the most money and sell electricity in a way that's going to make them the most profit. They're always going to choose whatever the cheapest thing is to generate the electricity so they can maximize their profit.
Right.
But we can make, and right now they have access to so much fossil fuels that they're choosing that, and they're not putting in the energy to build up the renewable. It's happening slowly, but it's not happening fast enough. So if we come in here and we say, no, this is what we got to do. We got to build up our renewables seriously, fast, and that it's an investment, but it's one we have to make. I mean, we keep on dragging our feet on the climate issue, and it's
getting worse.
Really,
we're getting to the point of no return on climate change, and if we don't get serious in the next decade or so, this planet is, for all intents and purposes, screwed.
Yeah, in so many words, I mean, there's a lot to be lost, and there's a lot of habitability of the planet to be lost. I mean, we're going to make, imagine, the sea level. There's enough ice in Antarctica to raise the sea level 200 feet, but in the short term, there's, but with short term meaning maybe 2100, 2200, easily 20 feet. That's easy for Antarctica to raise the sea 20 feet, and Greenland another 20 feet. That's nothing compared to the total amount of ice that's locked up in the poles. But just imagine what 20 feet of sea level rise does to New York City. I mean, and so many cities around the world are really close to sea level. And also a lot of nuclear plants are close to sea level, like
Right.
Fukushima in Japan. They have to be because they need a source of water to keep things cool. They need to keep circulating water. And those things, how many billions of dollars it is to build a nuclear plant. And they are clean energy in a sense, right? I mean, unless you consider, nuclear pollution that lasts for millennia to be a pollutant, which it is. But in terms of global warming and carbon, they don't generate carbon dioxide, but they're too problematic in terms of cost and um, and imagine the scenario when if they get put out of business because of sea level rise. So um, I think there's a lot of people who care about all these things, and it's just about trying to preserve what we've got as a species. We've got a good thing going. We've got a nice habitable climate. We have a lot of food, but we have to learn to live in a way that is going to be sustainable. We have to learn to live in a way that doesn't just depend on fossil fuels, because newsflash, fossil fuels aren't going to be around forever.
Right.
Even if global warming wasn't a problem, even if we chose to keep using them because they have all this energy there, that's great, but they're not going to last forever, and they're not going to last quite as long as a lot of people tend to assume they're going to last.
Right.
If you start digging into it and looking at the rate, 100 billion, it's 100 million barrels of oil a day that we burn, and about a fifth of it, I think, is the United States. And if you look, I've seen, if you go online and look at how many years of fossil fuels do we have left, it's hard to find, but I found estimates in the 40-year range.
Wow.
Even if you push at current use rates, even if you push that out optimistically to 100 years, we got a lot of work to do as humanity, figuring out how are we going to move into the post fossil fuel era, because it's coming, whether you want it to or not. Like whether we do it voluntarily or whether we do it against our will, it's coming. And
it'd be better if we did it on our own rather than we just run out of that stuff, right?
Yeah, because as we run out and we don't have any other way of fueling our transportation, any other way of staying warm, uh, the price is going to keep going up as it becomes scarcer and scarcer. And who's going to be left out? Who's not going to be able to stay warm? Who's not going to be able to get around? It's the people with the fewest resources, and it's going to hurt like hell.
Yeah. Dr. Justin Paglino, I appreciate your time and your insight as always. Next time we have you on, we should dive more into the fossil fuel situation, because I know that's something that you're also very passionate about, and climate change in general, which is something I've gotten into over the last few years, just understanding the severity of it and how close we are to, as you're saying, running out, but also running out of time to do something about climate change. So always love talking to you. Always appreciate you bringing all this to the table for us.
It's really a pleasure, and thanks so much. I'm glad to see you're doing well. Your health is good.
Feeling great. Yeah. Had a second procedure, and everything seems to be where it needs to be now, and it's my heart's functioning much better. So thank you. I appreciate that.
It's great to see. I'm glad to know that.
Awesome. All right, well, we will be in touch. Again, I'll have you on back in a few weeks, and we can talk more about climate change.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
All right. Dr. Justin Paglino, Green Party candidate, and a really great guy. I always love talking to Dr. Justin. I am Joe McGuire. Have a great evening, and thank you for watching Connecticut Politics TV. For the latest interviews and analysis with Connecticut's leaders, visit ctpolitics.tv, and make sure you follow us on Twitter at ctpoliticstv. Have a great night.